I'm here at City Hall sitting down with Mayor Andrew Knack to talk about his term so far and what's to come for 2026. Thank you so much for sitting down with me, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for having me.
So 2025 was a bit of a wild ride for you. I wanted to start there. You had announced you weren't going to run for re-election as councillor and then ultimately decided to run for mayor and ended up winning that election. So after 12 years on council, how does it feel to finally switch roles and be in the mayor's chair?
Still a bit surreal. It still feels a little odd. It still hasn't fully sunk in. It's, you sort of go from the election and you're moving nonstop to the election day, and then you're sort of jumping right into it. And so there are moments each week where it's like, oh yeah, this is happening. But at the same time, it's just, you've got to hit the ground running and you've got to do this work. So I'm very fortunate to have had that 12 years of experience, because it allows me to just keep moving on some of these important files while working and refining some of the new skills I need in terms of this role.
Council just approved a 6.9% property tax increase, but I understand you want to do things differently next time around. So tell us about that.
Yes, I've talked about the need to restructure our budget process, because the sort of pendulum approach to budgeting is not working. If you go back from 2019 to 2022, over that 4-year budget cycle, we had the lowest property tax increases in more than 25 years. And then from 2023 to 2026, we had some of the highest in the last decade. And that going back and forth, creating those large surprises is, I think, what's really challenging for folks. While Edmonton is the most affordable major city in all of Canada, we know that there are still a lot of folks who are facing affordability challenges. And so the idea is getting out in community. I'll be out in every single ward with the local councillor, along with our city administration, to make sure we're having those honest conversations about what it costs to run a city. And then to truly understand what people are not willing to sacrifice and maybe what they are, in order to create a new foundation for our budget.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to turn next to public safety, because this was really front and center during the election, and your first motion as mayor was dedicated towards creating more daytime space for homeless Edmontonians to use. At the time, you said this is just part of the safety conversation. So what else can the city do on this issue?
So about every single year, the city of Edmonton is spending approximately $91 million a year responding to the homelessness crisis, the mental health and addictions crisis. We need to, similar to the idea of restructuring our budget, look at how we can restructure how we're spending that money. In an ideal world, how we do that with the provincial government to make sure that we're getting maximum value. So far, based off some of my meetings with the provincial ministers as well as the premier, I actually see a lot of opportunity for alignment to be able to co-create how we can better use that money to respond to that need, to make sure we're getting more people off the streets, into housing with the right supports, into addictions treatment, into those things that they need that will help support those individuals, but then they're going to help support an overall safer community. Because what I heard over and over and over again from Edmontonians is that they actually don't care whose jurisdiction this is. They just want to see progress on an issue that visibly is becoming more challenging. I saw encampments out at the very edge of every part of our city and would hear about that from residents. That visibility has brought this issue to the forefront, and it's why people want to see such immediate action. And I'm glad we were able to get action started within our first few weeks of increasing the number of winter warming spaces.
Homelessness is an area for collaboration with the provincial government, but also an area of tension. We heard from the Minister of Assisted Living and Social Services that he didn't think that day spaces were required, that Edmonton's emergency shelters had more than enough room. When you hear comments like that, how does that impact your relationship with the province moving forward?
No, thankfully, not really worried about that, because, that was before we had our first meeting. And when we got to actually have our first sit-down meeting, I was able to help explain what we were actually talking about when it came to that, and making sure that they understood that, in fact, a lot of the work they've done on increasing shelter capacity has been extremely beneficial to the city of Edmonton. We've seen more than 1,100 spaces added. We've seen a lot of those spaces, all of the spaces turn into 24/7, albeit they operate in a bit of a different way, each of them. And so when I was able to help provide a bit more of an explanation about what we were hoping to see, turns out it was probably just the wording of how we were describing it. So, we called them daytime shelter spaces. It's why actually more considering them what we would call winter warming spaces. So winter spaces where people can drop in, get additional support. This is supplemental and it's not meant to replace the work the provincial government's doing. But to me, more than anything, that served as the reminder of why it's important to make sure that we're sitting down on a regular and ongoing basis with the provincial government. I don't want them to react to something that they hear about in a media interview and then not realize the intent or the context behind it. And so Minister Nixon and I had a fantastic meeting. And yes, I'll be honest, I went into that meeting not sure how that was going to be because that had happened first. And Minister Nixon and I, when I was a councillor, occasionally went back and forth on a few other issues. I remember writing an op-ed once that then they responded to. And so I was expecting a little more tension, and no, we didn't have that. When we got to really understand where we were each coming from, what he was working on and what we were working on, what I found is that there was alignment in probably about 95% of what we were doing. So I actually, for the first time in years, feel optimism on this. It seems like there is true alignment from the federal government, provincial government, and the municipal government. I talked about this in the campaign. I said I wasn't afraid to go it alone if we needed to. I don't think we were going to need to, and that's really encouraging.
I wanted to ask you about a couple things coming to council in the new year. I understand you've brought forward a motion to come back to some of the zoning and infill conversations that were happening in the summer, and that administration will be preparing a report talking about some of the common concerns around infill height, unit numbers, tree preservation. So why did you feel that it was important to revisit that conversation sooner rather than later?
I think it is important to acknowledge that Edmonton, by far and away, is outperforming every other major city when it comes to housing affordability. So there's this understanding that needs to continue, that work needs to continue. At the same time, what I heard from Edmontonians is that they'd like us to still do some refinements. We made some refinements back in July that address how big a building can be, the massing of that building. But there's still a need to do a little bit more work on that. And so why I wanted to do this sooner rather than later is I want to just get this issue put to rest. We need to make those changes. I don't think these are going to be incredibly challenging changes to make. I think they will give comfort to the vast majority of people who understand the need why the city continues to need to do infill, and at the same time was just hoping to see their concerns better reflected in some of the changes. So let's get it done. And then let's make sure we continue to take advantage of this great opportunity that we have to continue to be the most affordable of the major cities. And I'm excited about this potential.
I saved our most serious question for last.
Excellent.
As you are curating your image as mayor, are we going to see more or less blue suits in 2026?
You will see only blue suits. So yes, while the suits look a little different, and may not, this is a navy blue suit. So there's the bright blue suit, there's the middle blue suit, there's navy blue suits. You're going to still see the blue glasses. You'll see blue in the socks if you can get that in there as well. But there will still be plenty of blue. We'll just have different variations of blue as we go forward.
There you go. I wore my navy suit for you
Exactly.
today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining me.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.